What's going on, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pitt podcast. But as you can see, this is the crossover graphic. It's a Locked On crossover today on Tuesday's episode of Locked On Pitt and Locked On Blue Devils, as I have Locked On Blue Devils host JJ Jackson here to preview the big matchup between Pitt and Duke. And JJ, today, really big game for both of these teams, of course. And I'm really excited to do this crossover with you, man.
Let's have some fun, Nick. It's going to be a great game a little bit later tonight. We've got a lot of things that we want to talk about. Time to have some fun. Let's get it.
Absolutely. Time to have some fun. But before we get into that, I want to let you know this episode of Locked On Crossover is brought to you by Run Your Pool, because today's episode of that is March Madness is here and it's coming even quicker. And if you are a Blue Devils fan in this case, certainly if you're not a Pitt fan, you're not going to be filling out many brackets with Pitt in it this year. But if you are a Blue Devils fan, you will be filling out brackets, and March Madness is here, and Run Your Pool has a better way to create your bracket. RunYourPool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. Make sure to go check that out, folks. More on that later. But JJ, I think we have to talk about the imminent storyline of this game, and it's obviously Coach Krzyzewski is going to be leaving here soon. College basketball world obviously losing a titan in that respect, but also the justice, it feels like it's going to be against a former player of his, a guy that has been an assistant coach under him, Jeff Capel. It really does feel like it's just so right.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And here we are, as you said, it's the month of March. Today is March 1st, so it's the best time of the year for Duke basketball fans. Last year was the first time in over 25 years that Duke did not make the NCAA tournament. And so going into these last couple of games, it feels good to have tournament conversations. And you're right, the final road game tonight in the career of Mike Krzyzewski at Pittsburgh against a former player, like you said, in Jeff Capel, an associate head coach. I don't know that there is anyone else I would rather see Duke go up against than a Jeff Capel coach team. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm ready for every camera shot of the two embracing before and after the game. I'm ready for all of it, and I think a lot of Duke fans are as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see this because I know obviously Pitt isn't the team that you kind of look at and say is some marquee team in the ACC. Certainly they are not. They're one of the worst, in fact. I think they're 12th right now in the conference. But this is a Jeff Capel team that has historically, even when Pitt hasn't been great, these battles have been pretty good between Coach K and Capel. I mean, Pitt won last year, obviously, that explosive game at the Pete, where everyone thought Pitt was back and then they weren't. This is a really good one. And then the history, of course, down there in North Carolina between these two. These two guys are ACC guys through and through. They're Duke guys through and through. And you're going to see all of that, kind of the layers, because Coach K has seen Jeff Capel grow up from a young guy that was, a great guard for Duke and played on many tournament teams and has now become a head coach of 3 different programs.
Exactly, and won a national championship as an assistant coach with the Duke Blue Devils, did Jeff Capel. And look, it's going to be a tough game tonight from the Pitt perspective. Duke right now, the number 4 team in the entire country with a 25-4 record. And with a win tonight over Pitt, Duke secures at least a share of the ACC regular season championship before the ACC tourney starts next week. Pitt at just 11-18 overall in the season. Tough times this year for the Panthers. I know there's buyout conversations that you've been having on Locked On Pitt in recent weeks, which is never a good spot for any fan base to be in with their coach. And it stings a little bit knowing that Capel is a Duke guy, knowing that he did have some good runs at VCU and Oklahoma at previous stops. But to see that it's not working out so well this year is certainly tough.
Yeah, it's been an up and down year, a topsy-turvy year for Pitt. It's been a year where they've had some really bad luck, and I don't think Jeff Capel has completely gotten the fair, sweet deal of it all. But also, it's year 4 now, and you're starting to see patterns emerge and troubling patterns at that. And I think that's why you have to have those conversations, and we'll certainly talk about that more. But it's getting into murky waters here for Jeff Capel, and I do think the overlying thing is that he thought this job that Pitt had, Pitt back just a decade ago was obviously a perennial tournament team. They were always one of the better teams in the Big East. And then as they moved to the ACC, they still went to the tournament a lot in their first few years under Jamie Dixon. Then Dixon goes to TCU. They have this fractured marriage. Kevin Stallings and kind of wrecks the program. And Jeff Capel thought he could resurrect it. I think it's been a tougher job than he thought it would be.
No doubt. I mean, absolutely. You mentioned the Kevin Stallings years were just disastrous to watch from afar, and getting to compete against Pitt many years in the ACC wasn't someone that you necessarily worried about. It's always fun for all of the Coach K former assistants to get head coaching jobs of their own. I mean, you mentioned him being a titan of the sport. He's one of the greatest of all time. He's got more wins than anyone else that's ever coached on a college basketball sideline. And with that being said, when he does have assistant coaches that work in the ACC, like Notre Dame with Mike Bray, a former Duke assistant, it's always bittersweet when you compete head to head against those guys. I know it was special for Capel to get the win over Duke a year ago. But I think once these coaches walk away from Durham and walk away from the best players in the country and then have to go do it by themselves, they kind of realize just how difficult it is. And not to say Jeff Capel didn't know what he was getting into. I mean, look, you talk about this a lot. This guy coached Blake Griffin at Oklahoma, has had some really talented players over the years, but it's just different when you're not in Durham anymore.
It is. And I think, yes, he can learn certain things from Coach K. You can obviously take those lessons, but when you're on your own, it's a whole different animal. And I think this is what Coach Capel has essentially thought about and seen is that having a program where you are rebuilding it from the ground up, essentially. Pitt was one of the worst jobs in the Power Five, Power Six, whatever you want to say it is. It was a terrible job. I mean, they had just gone 0-18 in the conference. And if you know how hard it is to go winless in conference play, even if you're really bad, usually you can scoot your way into one win. Pitt didn't have many ACC talented players. I think, they did have a few players there like Parker Stewart and Marcus Carr, now two guys that are obviously doing pretty well at Texas and Indiana, respectively. But there weren't a lot of ACC caliber players on that team. It was a really bad team. And so Coach Capel had to recruit the whole squad back, had to make sure then with the advent of the transfer portal that he could keep everyone. And obviously that didn't come to fruition. There were a lot of things that happened behind the scenes and that have come up, but a lot has really gone in the way of the South for Coach Capel, unfortunately, in his squad.
I want to get into the nitty gritty about this Pitt team and get a little bit more focused on tonight's matchup against a top 5 Duke Blue Devils team. I'll ask Nick Farabaugh, the host of Locked On Pitt, about the Panthers. After this, you're listening to Locked On Crossover, Duke and Pitt, coming up in just a moment. Our show today is brought to you by our friends over at March Madness and runyourpool.com. March Madness starts today. It's March 1st. That means you need to start thinking now about where you're going to be running your brackets this year. Are you going for the usual or are you looking for the best? We've done our homework and we're running brackets with runyourpool.com. Along with standard brackets, Run Your Pool offers game types like Survivor or Pick X. Both are really fun in their own way. They have options to edit scoring and they offer more intel to make your picks, all the stuff you won't find at ESPN or CBS. Clearly, we believe Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that when we're using the service. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. And while you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. All the rules and details will be available there. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. We look forward to seeing and beating you there. The month of March is here. It's March 1st. March Madness is right around the corner, and we're talking college basketball today on this Locked On Crossover edition. My name is JJ Jackson. Duke fans know me as the host of Locked On Blue Devils. Nick Farabaugh is with me as well. Pitt fans know him as the host of Locked On Pitt each and every day. Fun game coming up tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern tip-off at Pitt. You can watch the game on the ACC network. 11-18 overall on the season. Tell me a little bit about these last few weeks of basketball for the Panthers, Nick.
Well, we want to talk about a roller coaster. I mean, that's what it's been. Pitt gets essentially crushed down in Blacksburg against Virginia Tech. They lose a pretty spirited game at the Pete against Virginia Tech, too. Virginia Tech had an unbelievable shooting stretch. I think it was they had not missed a basket in 12 minutes of game time at one point in that game.
Wow.
They were shooting 80% from three, and it wasn't a small percentage either. They were like 10 of 12 from downtown in the first half. And then Pitt kind of did the same thing in the second half. It was unbelievable. I don't think I'll ever see a game like it again. Ended up being 76-71, which is crazy. But then you saw them lose those two games, but then bounce back on the road, beat Florida State on the road, and that was a good win. It was a grinded out type of win. They come home, defeat NC State, a game that they really needed to win. They wanted to win. And then, of course, they go down to Chapel Hill and shock UNC and Hubert Davis and pull off a massive upset. Now, that was obviously a big one. And, people thought, oh, maybe Pitt's turning the corner here now and they're coming down the road. And then they go back home and they drop a game to a really bad Georgia Tech team. That was really bad. And then they come out and get absolutely run off their own court by Miami. And it really was just a cycle of emotions because you saw the high of the win against North Carolina. Well, just a week later, Pitt comes out with arguably their two worst performances in 2 months and really drops the ball against a winnable game against Georgia Tech. And where really, I know that, Miami's a better team than Pitt, but there's no reason you should be getting run off your own court, losing by 30 at one point. And really, I know that game ended up with being a 21-point victory for Miami. It was a lot worse than it actually appeared. Pitt made a nice late run that got them within, I think, 18. It was 32 at one point. Miami was up. It was a complete domination. So it's been a rough patch for this squad. And again, they've been injured a lot. It's been a team that has cycled through different lineups trying to find out what's working, what's going right. But this is also a team that now is as healthy as it's been all year. And you cannot have performances like that down the stretch, especially because this has been a Jeff Capel staple here at Pitt where the teams have fallen apart late in the year. And if that continues to happen, it's not just a problem, it's a pattern. And if it's a pattern, that's where the talks start to come on. It's, does he come back? Is he the right man for the job? All those questions start to rise up.
So a 3-game winning streak and then dropping a couple of games going into tonight's matchup against Duke, and notably that win against North Carolina. That was awesome for Duke fans to watch, knowing that Capel got the Tar Heels again and how heated that rivalry is between those teams. Nick, tell us a little bit about the Pittsburgh players on the roster, the notable guys to be on the lookout for. With all due respect to Pitt this season, they don't have top 5 draft picks like Paolo Banchero or A.J. Griffin that I'll elaborate on a little bit further. So give us the rundown on some of the standout guys.
Yeah, well, Pitt, again, doesn't have those lottery guys, but I think they have a few really talented players. I think the issue with this Pitt team is that they don't have a lot of depth, but their starting 5 are a potent starting 5. And it's why you can see them beat teams like North Carolina or compete with a lot of teams like Virginia. They've competed with top teams. So you have guys like John Hughley, who really stood out in that game against UNC. He took Armando Bacot and made him a complete non-factor. And John Hughley has been one of the better big men in the ACC all year. And this is where Pitt's strength is. Their front court is very good. Their two guys, Mo Gee, Mohamedou Gee, and John Hughley are two very good guys. Now, Gee's a bit of an interesting 4 because he's a stretch 4 that can shoot the 3. He's a great shot blocker, one of the best shot blockers in the ACC, but he's also got guard-like skills. A guy that started out 5'10" at Stony Brook, shot all the way up to 6'10" by the time he's at now. So he's got these guard-like skills at that size. He's a very unique player, can stretch the floor, can bang down low, a really good rebounder with his length. He's a tough defender. He's really the crux of their defense. If they can get him in foul trouble, if Duke can get Mo Gee or John Hughley in foul trouble, you're going to see a lot of different areas. And they love to get the ball down in the low block there to John Hughley. He's that type of guy who can really bang down low with about anyone. Obviously, this will be a really good test for him. I think this is the test of the season for John Hughley. If he could do it to Armando Bacot, you think he can do it to a lot of different guys. But the question is, can he do it to Mark Williams? I don't know. We'll see. That's going to be a really good matchup to watch.
Yeah.
Outside of that, the guards for Pitt, I think the guards for Pitt as well are very talented. Jamarius Burton's their point guard mainly. They don't really have a true point guard, which has always been an issue, so they turn the ball over a lot. But they have 2 secondary ball handlers in Femi Odukale and Jamarius Burton. Burton is a mid-range sniper. If you look at him, that's exactly what he does. He's a guy that drives to the basket and can hit you with a spinning hook shot, a fadeaway, from anywhere in the mid-range game, he can hit you, and his three-point shooting has gotten a lot better as time's gone on as well. Odukale's a guy that if he's on, he's one of the most dangerous players you'll face, but if he's not on, it's going to be an issue. Then you have Ithiel Horton, and Horton's the guy that has come back recently from his suspension. He's their three-point sniper. If he's on, watch out. And in Pitt's 3-game win streak, he averaged over 20 points per game. He averaged, I think, 6 threes per game. This was a guy that was really feeling it. The last 2 games, he has not been very good. He's been a defensive liability. But if he's on, Ithiel Horton gives them types of gravity that open things up for Gee, Odukale, Burton. He opens the floor for everyone up, so he gives them more spacing. So if he's on, again, I don't think Pitt's going to win this game under any circumstance, whatever. But if Ithiel Horton's on, this game can at least be a little bit more competitive than people might think.
Yeah, so we take a look at the numbers and a deeper dive into this, talking about Duke and Pitt coming up a little bit later tonight. Appreciate you watching or listening to this Locked On crossover edition of Pitt and Blue Devils. So, very different stories offensively for these teams. Duke in the conference, while they're positioned first in the league, they're also the greatest scoring offense in the ACC, averaging 80.1 points per game. Their last outing on Saturday against Syracuse, Duke put 97 points on the scoreboard. Pitt, meanwhile, is dead last. The Panthers averaging 62.5 points per game. And hearing the rundown, I mean, that's as in-depth of coverage for Pitt basketball that I've seen recently, Nick. Why has this team struggled so much offensively?
Well, yeah, it's the fact that they really only have 5 players. You see, I only mentioned 5 guys. Off the bench, it's a lot of question marks. Onyebuchi Azeakuda, who is their fourth guard and sometimes their defender slash point guard that they bring on. He's a walk-on that got put on scholarship this year. He's not a guy that should be playing as much as he has this year. Noah Collier's a young athletic guy, but he's a developmental guy. He's not ready to play just yet. Will Jeffress is an 18-year-old sophomore who is still feeling out his game, doesn't have the confidence in his shot. Really good defender, really good rebounder. He'll give you quality minutes, 10 minutes or so, but he's not going to give you a quality scoring output. They don't really have a scorer off the bench, and that's been an issue. And so that's where they miss a guy like Nike Sabandi, who tore his ACL before the season. And so they miss him. He's their kind of dribble drive slasher that can shoot off dribble and do all these different types of things that they don't really have. And so they're a very, very short team. They are going to play with 5, and they're going to play with their 5 a lot. I think all these guys that are starting right now over the past 5 or 6 games are averaging 35 plus minutes. So they play a lot of minutes, and it's really just those 5. So you only have to worry about the 5. So if Odukali's off and Burton's off, it's 3 guys essentially. So all 5 of them have to be on at all times. And that's partially why this team hasn't been as good as they should be, because the team is so has a lack of depth that
Right.
requires these guys to play at a high level every night. Now, obviously, you just can't rely on that. Guys are going to have off nights. Guys are not going to play well, and there's just no options off the bench to relieve a guy like Odukali if he's not having a good day, or Hughley's not having his day. They don't really have another big to go to. They don't have another guy. If one of these bigs gets into foul trouble, that's when it really gets into an issue. Mo Gee has had an issue of getting into foul trouble as of recent, and he's such a glue guy for them defensively and offensively that when he goes out, things just change drastically. So it's an issue if one of these guys gets into foul trouble, and that's why they've struggled. Again, it's not that they don't have a talented guy. These 5 guys are talented. They're solid players. The issue is that the depth is just not there, and if one of these guys has an off night, it's kind of curtains.
Let's talk a little bit about this Duke basketball team. I'll have Nick ask me a couple of questions. We've got one more break due up here, and still to come, plenty more basketball talk later tonight. Duke versus Pittsburgh, 8 o'clock Eastern tip on the ACC network.
Folks, football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, betonline.net is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season, and it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, as well as other coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, folks, welcome back to this episode of Locked On Crossover. Nick Farabaugh, host of Locked On Pitt, here with JJ Jackson, the host of Locked On Blue Devils, as we continue to talk a little bit about this Pitt Duke matchup. Obviously, this one is a matchup that is highly scrutinized among Pitt fans, thinking they're going to get crushed. And here's why. I guess we'll learn a little bit more. JJ, give me a little bit of rundown about this Duke team. Obviously, they have a few big names. Paolo Banchero, obviously, is a big name. But are there guys that, maybe don't get talked about enough that Pitt has to worry about? Because obviously the matchup here, it's not great for Pitt.
Yeah, and Paulo gets the headlines, that's for sure. He's a projected top 3 pick. A lot of people make the case for him to be the #1 overall pick. But what's a great thing about this Duke basketball team in terms of the next level and guys that you're going to see is there's been a point in the season. It's up and down with draft stocks always fluctuating and that sort of thing. But there are moments in the year, and it can certainly change again this way in March, where Duke has 5 projected first-round picks on the roster. That's only happened once before, and that was Kentucky, and Duke has the chance to tie that. Obviously, we mentioned Mark Williams a little bit earlier. The 7'1" center for Duke is coming off the best game of his college career on Saturday against Syracuse, where he scored a career-high 28 points and 12 rebounds. Really dominant. It took Syracuse is always playing that zone defense and to find the inside, get some putback dunks and that sort of thing. Mark was excellent in that regard. So he's someone to be on the lookout for if Duke decides to play a little bit bigger with Paolo and Mark getting it going down low. Also, you've got Trevor Keels, a freshman guard for the Blue Devils, who had a 25-point performance in the very first game of the season against Kentucky, a top 10 matchup. He made himself a household name at that point. Keels missed 3 games in the middle portion of the season with a knee injury, but he's been back gaining more confidence. And Duke has yet to lose a game this season when Trevor Keels scores at least 13 points. He's a shooter. He's a driver. He looks like a middle linebacker, dribbling the basketball to the rim and finishing in that regard. So he's someone to certainly be on the lookout for. You've got also A.J. Griffin. He has been one of the biggest risers in all of college basketball. He is shooting 49.7% from three-point range. Unbelievable numbers. He was 6 of 10 from deep. You mentioned some shooting for Pittsburgh. A.J. Griffin has been the standard for Duke. His dad is an assistant coach for the Toronto Raptors. He's grown up in a basketball family, and A.J. Griffin is likely going to be a lottery pick when it's all said and done at the end of the season. You've got Wendell Moore Jr., who's played against Pitt throughout his career, who had a couple of seasons where his freshman year he had the big game winner against Chapel Hill, against the Tar Heels on a lay-in there at the buzzer. He's had an up and down year, but he's a big leader for this Duke team. And then also you've got Jeremy Roach, another point guard for Duke, who played high school basketball with Trevor Keels. When Jeremy Roach controls the pace, can share the basketball, Duke's at its best. And so, yeah, there are a lot of names to be on the lookout for when it comes to Duke basketball a little bit later tonight. If you're a Pitt fan watching this, and I know Pitt's not going to be in the NCAA tournament unless a miracle happened and they found a way to win all the games up there in Brooklyn at the ACC tournament. So I think this is a fun team that Pitt should absolutely want to root for once it comes to March.
Yeah, it is a fun team, and it's a deep team, and I think it's they complement each other very well because
Yeah,
Duke has a lot of different lineups they can play. I think that they have a lot of different ideas working there, and Coach K has always been a guy that can work multiple lineups and play to the matchup extremely well. So now I guess if you look at the close Duke games or the losses Duke has had, has there been a commonality factor to it? If Pitt is going to keep this close somehow and make this a game where Coach K and Jeff Capel are both going to sweat on the sidelines at the peak, what's it going to take?
Yeah, I think one, it's forcing turnovers. When Duke has lost, they have not taken good care of the basketball. I think that's true for any college basketball team out there. We mentioned Duke being the top scoring offense in the country. So if the defense can kind of force Duke into tougher shots and not find the ball on the interior to Mark Williams or Paolo and really test them to make sure their shots are falling that night, I think Pitt's going to be in a good position. And then the other thing, Nick, that I'll tell you is this Duke basketball team is one of the top teams, not only in the ACC, but all of college basketball defending the three-point line. So if Pitt were to have a night where they're making tons and tons of threes from the outside, that's upset potential right there. So I think those are a couple of key factors. If Pitt can turn Duke over, if they can make shots from the outside, and then in addition to that, if they can make Duke take tough shots when Pitt is on the defensive end, they'll be in a good spot.
And that was the formula for Pitt against North Carolina. They shot their best percentage from three. They shot 56% from downtown in that game. Ithiel Horton over that stretch, I think he had 6 threes in that game against UNC, 7 against Florida State. So this was a guy that could get going, and if he's hot, he's hot. And so I
Absolutely.
think he's kind of the X factor for Pitt if they're going to keep it close. But Duke overall, it seems like they're going to probably put this on Pitt and Paolo Banchero and Wendell Moore, Trevor Keels. They have so many different ways to beat you. For a Jeff Capel led team that's now coming in, they retired. Jeff Capel said now they have a little break. I guess when you look at this Duke team, what is the one area of weakness, or is there an area of weakness that you look at personnel wise that you think Pitt could attack in this game?
That's a good question. I think in the backcourt would probably be, and that's a little surprising. Obviously, you're going to get the headlines from the likes of Mark Williams and Paolo Banchero on the inside. But when Duke has their guards not making shots, they become very inefficient. And then sometimes Paolo can have some of his most inefficient performances. Paolo Banchero has only scored in single digits twice this season. Both times Duke played Virginia, and the Blue Devils went 1-1 in those games. So if you're trying to key in on one group, I definitely would say the backcourt, the Jeremy Roaches, the Trevor Keels, the Wendell Moore Juniors. If they are inefficient shooting the basketball from the outside, if Joey Baker can add anything from three-point range, or if he comes in and he's just completely missing, that's where Pitt should look to attack, because you're going to be in a good spot competing against Duke.
Yeah, and that's going to be a tough one to pick, because Pitt is a team that primarily works inside the paint. They
Right.
try to get it to Gee and Hughley, so they're going to have to change it. They're going to have to go out in this time. It's going to be Ithiel Horton. It's going to be Jamarius Burton. Pitt's backcourt's going to really have to play well today, I think, in order to win this game. But overall, when you look at this game and you look at this team Duke has, what's at stake for today's game? And overall, where do you think this team's going to go as they continue to go into March?
Yeah, I think the Duke team is trending in the right direction. As I said, just had 97 points on Saturday against Syracuse in the final meeting between Mike Krzyzewski and Jim Boeheim. For the first time ever, Jim Boeheim, who's been at Syracuse for 40 plus years, much like Mike Krzyzewski, a Boeheim-led team lost to the same opponent by 20 plus points twice in the same season. So Duke's figuring things out offensively. I think that's a sign of good things to come. Saturday is going to be absolutely electric, and every college basketball fan, every sports fan should want to take in Saturday when Mike Krzyzewski walks into Cameron Indoor Stadium for the final time and competes in college basketball's finest rivalry. But you look at tonight's matchup in particular, what's at stake. As I said a little bit earlier, if Duke wins tonight, they claim a share of the regular season championship in the ACC, something the Blue Devils have not accomplished in over a decade, which is pretty surprising. Duke will be 2 or 3 in the regular season and absolutely win a couple of ACC tournament titles within the last decade, but haven't outright won the league in over a decade. So that's what's at stake in particular. You look at some of the numbers. I always like to share with Locked On Blue Devils fans what the ESPN Basketball Power Index is thinking about the matchup. And right now, Duke has a 94.3% chance to win this game, which means if you're a Pitt fan, just a 5.7% chance to knock off the Duke Blue Devils. But there's a chance, Nick, and that's all it takes. There's a chance for this to be done.
There's a chance. And what's at stake for Pitt? It would be the biggest upset in years for this Pitt team. And Jeff Capel's had a few of them under this team. They've gone into Florida State and knocked them off a few times when you would not expect it. Leonard Hamilton's teams have been an issue for Jeff Capel at times, but at other times, so is Pitt. Pitt has pulled off some upsets that you would not expect them to do, but again, this one would be on a different level. This would be, and for Capel to do it in the final road game against Coach K would absolutely be crazy, I think. But again, Pitt only has 6 conference wins. Yeah, it'd be nice to get the 7th, but it's not really what you are attaining to. There's not much at stake here tonight for Pitt, is what I will say. I don't think anything's really going to change much for Jeff Capel in terms of what his outlook is next year. And I think he clinched himself a 5th year through a few factors. One, the buyout's like $15 million. Pitt's not made of that money. They are made of that money. They could pull it out, but obviously the football program is going through the roof right now, and they really don't want to take any money from that. And then when you look at it, Jeff Capel, I think with that upset win against UNC, there's talent here. There's at least something to build on. If you can keep the guys you have, maybe Pitt can be in the conversation where Wake Forest is next year, and different things can happen. So not much at stake today. A great upset for, I guess, a Capel disciple, for a Coach K disciple rather, would be the biggest thing. It would be a personal thing for Jeff Capel, and that would be unbelievable, I feel like.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how this game plays out. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm certainly going to be watching every second of it. And on tomorrow's show, we'll recap it all. I know you'll do the same on Locked On Pitt moving forward. What fun this was, Nick. I really enjoyed doing this. We had a lot of fun during football season. So glad that with our teams meeting once this basketball season, we were able to do something like this. Please, everybody, go ahead and subscribe to the Locked On Pitt YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Locked On Blue Devils YouTube channel. Great content coming here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Follow our shows on social media, and make sure you leave us 5-star rating and reviews wherever you get your podcasts. I had a whole lot of fun, Nick. Thanks, man.
Thanks for having this happen, JJ. And as always, folks, as I always say, thanks for listening. I always say hail to Pitt because that's the end mantra for this show on Locked on Pitt. So as we end this Locked on crossover, I'll say it, hail to Pitt.